work to build a majority of support in the state of Oregon. And we had a statewide campaign, tens of thousands of signatures, enough to get to the ballot by the time all was said and done. But the Windsor decision in the summer of 2013 really changed the landscape, and we started to see court cases filed and actually starting to win challenges at the state level. There had been an independent attorney here in Oregon who had filed a case with a couple of two plaintiff couples, and by the end of 2013, we had joined with the ACLU, had joined the case with a couple of plaintiff couples, and also Basic Rights Oregon as a party to the case. So we had this tandem strategy with a full-on ballot measure campaign ready to go to the ballot if we needed it, and a really optimistic chance in the courts. The timing was phenomenal because our deadline for turning in signatures would have been July of 2014. So the tension around what was going to happen and how this was going to play out was just remarkable. And so for that victory in the court to come with plenty of time to make the really thoughtful decision not to call for a public vote on the issue was a huge relief, and was only strengthened by the Supreme Court ruling just a little over a year later.
Excellent. Now, clarifying question for you. Our
Sure.
previously mentioned guest Byron Beck told us in an interview that he and his partner Juan Martinez had filed a suit at one point. Were they part of the plaintiffs that were included in this 2014 case that you were just mentioning? Did you have any involvement with Byron Beck?
Oh, sure. Oh, well, Byron's partner, Juan, and I worked together for 8 years. He was the development director here at Basic Rights Oregon, and they're among my dearest friends that I call family. So, actually, interestingly, one of the strategies that we used back in 2004 was when Measure 36 passed. We challenged it in the courts, and we had, I believe, about 10 plaintiff couples, but the name of that case was Martinez versus the state of Oregon, and Juan Martinez and Byron Beck. So Juan being Byron's partner. That's who that's actually who the case was named after, because they were the first couple listed on the list of plaintiff couples. Our case was premised on the idea that Measure 36 actually didn't just amend our state constitution, but actually sort of redefined a basic constitutional right, and there's a different process required for a redefinition, and that and we were claiming that this shouldn't be able to happen through a simple majority vote of the public, which, I believe to this day, but we were unsuccessful in that case. And so, of course, having already exhausted the legal path to challenge Measure 36, that actually, the final ruling in all of our appeals of that case wasn't until, I believe, 2009, and it was at that point that we really dug in on the Hearts and Minds work, because we knew that ultimately to get to the freedom to marry in Oregon, we would need to head for the ballot. And then, of course, as I described, another path opened up kind of late in the process that ultimately created the resolution that we were looking for. One of the things that I'm most proud of about our work at Basic Rights Oregon during my tenure is that, 2009 was also the year that we launched a new strategic plan. It was we were coming off of we had successfully passed a statewide non-discrimination law and a strong domestic partnership law, had defended them in court, and had really turned our attention to how we as an organization were effectively serving all members of the LGBTQ community. And we heard loud and clear from folks of color in our community and transgender people that felt that we weren't prioritizing issues that were affecting their daily lives, and that we hadn't engaged the leadership of folks of color and transgender people effectively in our work. And we really took that to heart and centered racial justice and transgender justice in our priorities and in our strategic plan that we launched in 2009. And from that point forward, we have built, I think nationally recognized programs for LGBT folks of color, for transgender people who, are at the center of the decision making and the priority setting. We've had some of the biggest policy victories in the nation by advancing access to health care for transgender people and addressing economic justice issues and issues of racial profiling that disproportionately impact LGBT folks of color and LGBT immigrants. So all of that has been, a huge part of the work, both through and beyond the work that we did to win the freedom to marry. And it's important to me that none of that is sort of lost in the conversation about, about the big marriage win.
No, definitely. And I assume that starting that conversation and the inclusivity, with all those members of the community, I assume that was a game changer and that opened up new doors of where you and Basic Rights Oregon went in terms of the overall structure and plan.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's been transformative. We've got, the leadership of our organization looks entirely different than it did 7 or 8 years ago in terms of the diversity and the engagement on our board and in our staff, the ways in which we partner with organizations and coalitions in the state of Oregon and nationally. So it's been, it's been remarkable.
Yes, and I just saw your policy director give a speech at the Trans Pride March, and there was an extremely diverse and very good crowd there for that event.
Yeah,
so I was very
pleased
to participate in that.
Yep.
Were you present?
Yep. I was there with my two boys.
Excellent. This is Pride Month, and we're coming very, very close to this 1-year anniversary of the historic, Supreme Court decision in Obergefell v. Hodges. Full disclosure, we did have Jim Obergefell on the show last week, and he sort of walked us through the process of, what happened when his husband John was dying from ALS, and they saw the Windsor decision on TV and decided to try and get the marriage license, and then all of the steps that they went through with their attorney, starting in Cincinnati, get to the next level of court all the way to the Supreme Court. So it's a very fascinating story, but it's all part of the bigger picture, the national picture. He's sort of the figurehead, but I want to just get your take on Jim Obergefell and his story, Love Wins. What is Jim's story of love with his partner, John, fighting the marriage fight while his partner was dying from ALS? What does Jim's story speak to you personally?
It speaks to the courage and the resilience of our community. I think Jim and the struggle that he and his partner took on at a time when, he was also, as his partner was passing away from ALS, he was also dealing with the loss of his beloved, lifelong partner. And I think it's both beautiful and so painful to see the ways in which folks are willing to fight for change on this really grand scale of aiming to impact the lives of, of all of the members of their community, even while dealing with, tremendous personal challenges. And we see that so often, so many members of our community face challenges. We see the sort of unrelenting, violence and discrimination that plagues transgender communities, particularly trans women of color. We see the struggles of LGBTQ, immigrants and their families seeking to, make a life and find support in this country. That so often it is when we are, pushed to our limits of, what we can bear to face that folks rise up and organize and, make the case for equality and for freedom and for justice. And it's just so powerful.
Definitely. And I want to ask you, President Obama is in the final months of his historic 8-year term as president of the country. First president to come out and first say that he believes same-sex couples have the right to marry, and then went through step by step, taking away don't ask, don't tell, allowing gay and transgender military members. So I take it that it's a given that the momentum with the partnership with President Obama has been a friend to the movement. What thoughts and feelings do you have about the actions taken to help the community by President Obama?
I'm a huge fan. I think Obama has been a game changer for the LGBTQ community. His leadership and thoughtfulness around policy and the way that he's brought LGBTQ voices into the leadership of his administration means that there are folks from our community that are positioned to be thinking about all of the ways in which the federal government has the opportunity to do better by LGBTQ people, and we've seen that in recent months with the policies that have been issued around the Department of Education. We've seen that in the changes that have been made, at every level in terms of healthcare provisions within the federal government, the non-discrimination, clauses in the healthcare plan and so forth. And the thing that I think has been so remarkable is that, not only was Obama the first president to publicly and passionately support the freedom to marry, but he's been able to, make a difference in this community on a really large scale, and then also sort of very much on an individual level. I think I've seen, more movement leaders from the LGBTQ movement engaged and, invited to White House receptions and having the opportunity to, to be present with our president than more so than I've ever seen with any other administration. It's been remarkable, and I hope that trend continues with the next administration.
Yeah, duly noted. So in terms of LGBTQ rights, as far as how far we've advanced on both state-by-state levels, the freedom to marry through the Supreme Court, how important is the 2016 presidential election for the LGBTQ community? What are the stakes? How big is it?
Whew. I mean, the stakes are huge, at this moment, given the choice in front of the nation. There's no question that we need people to engage, to be involved, to continue to tell their stories and to connect that to the need for leadership, like Hillary Clinton represents. We not only have the opportunity to elect the first woman president, but one that's been a champion for LGBT communities. And because so much progress has been made through the administrative actions of President Obama, there's so much at stake, because with the wrong leadership in that office, it could all be overturned with the stroke of a pen. It doesn't require a vote of Congress to change administrative policy. That's up to the president, and we need a president that will not only protect the gains that have been made, but push forward and do better.
Probably some expected backlash to the nation advancing so far, so fast, relatively speaking, by the Supreme Court ruling on same-sex marriage. And we've seen that on a state-by-state level with sort of these ugly, anti-LGBT hate bills, North Carolina bathroom bills, Mississippi. Obviously, Basic Rights Oregon has been very active and very busy at combating all these levels of hate. But what is your take when you see the backlash go through, like in North Carolina, when you have the full support of the governor of the state vehemently supporting that bill? I mean, is it just repulsive at every level? Like, what is your immediate reaction when you have the state stepping out of the nation and saying, no, we're not with you?
Oh, it's heartbreaking, particularly because, we've had our share of setbacks and the, horrible ballot measure attacks in Oregon. And so, we know at our core what it feels like to have your state's leadership and what feels like your entire community turn against you, that feeling that your friends and neighbors don't support you or your family, that they don't believe that you deserve, basic human rights, basic human dignity. That's a incredibly painful thing to deal with. And, you're talking about these horrible anti-gay policies that have passed, but we haven't